Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Agent Advantage. My name is Lorne Cooper. Yes, I'm a full-time real estate agent like much of you. And guess who I have here? I've here, opposite. I have Stevie Wonder. Steve, what's up, buddy?
Not much, just trying to keep up in this market. As we all know, some of the things that we're seeing each day are mind blowing. So just trying to stay alive. That's it.
Yeah, it's a challenging time in this market for sure. All right, so Steven Sarasin, how long you been in the real estate business?
So January last month, I hit 5 years fully licensed in the business.
And you're still surviving. It's an amazing thing, right?
Yeah, it's been good, and obviously, there's always a lot going on, always something to do.
Absolutely. All right, so why don't you tell everybody out there? Well, before we get into it, everybody watching, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. I always forget to tell people to do that, but you gotta mention that on YouTube, right? So do the thing, like, share, and subscribe. All right, let's get into it. Tell everyone what you were doing before you got into real estate, how real estate even came into your radar, and then your beginnings in the business.
Okay, so I always wanted to be in sales. I always wanted to make my own hours and everything like that. So prior to real estate, my family grew up in the construction industry, building houses, concrete, masonry, all that stuff. So I had quite a few jobs. But first off, in high school, there I used to deliver Chinese food in Sutton for the Golden Dragon. I worked at Coffee Time, managed that for a bit when I was young, and then got into construction. So we did a lot of home building, a lot of hard manual labor, and it took a toll on all of my family's bodies and stuff like that. So I said to myself, I don't think I can do the whole kind of 9 to 5 thing or kill my body like that. So one day my uncle called me up. He was the captain of the fire department for Georgina for forever until he retired, and called me up and he said, I think maybe you'd probably do pretty good in real estate and I would support you. He was a custom home builder full time since probably the 1980s in Keswick, and very well known. So that kind of gave me the motivation to get started, and then I started knocking off the courses, and here we are today.
All right, excellent. So let's talk about that then. You have some experience on the construction end of the business. You kind of know how things are put together. That's always helpful. And then you have an uncle that's involved in building homes, which is great. So you get your license, and then what? Because they don't teach you how to build a business. They teach you basically how to not get sued, right?
Exactly. So actually, what happened is I started the process to get the courses done, and then I was still doing a bit of construction, and then I want to say I got into a motorcycle accident. I rode off the bike. It was a brand new sport bike, so kind of put me out of. I wasn't allowed to go back to work for a bit, so I focused more on the courses. And I found that if I didn't do the in-class courses, then I wouldn't get it done. So did that, and then got my license, joined up at a brokerage, and started getting into all this different coaching. It was Rob Vivian coaching, and all these Facebook ads, and just kind of throwing money I didn't have at the time at everything, hoping that the deals would just come. And when I joined, it was right when we were in that hot like 2016 ish market. And
Right.
I remember me and my colleague we'd meet every day at the office. We'd go to the gym first, we'd go to the office, we'd make hundreds of phone calls, and everybody would tell us, hey, we'd love to sell our house if we can come move in with you, because there's nothing to buy. So that was the beginning, the cold calls, the door knocking, the open houses, all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, one day when we were right in the middle of cold calling, we heard about that announcement that the government made, and all of a sudden the market was a totally different story.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's good to give people some insight, especially if they're just getting into the business or thinking of getting into it. When you first started, what was your first year in real estate like? Because mine was atrocious, as I think you know, but what was your first year like?
Honestly, it was not really what I expected. It was there wasn't much business going on. So a lot of people reaching out to you, like I said, the coaching and stuff, and coaches all telling us the same thing, build a list of people that past client. Well, there wouldn't be any past clients then, but they said all your business is going to come from people that you already know or that you know of. So I didn't really take that serious. I was under the impression, look, everybody that I know, I grew up with. They don't have a lot of money. They don't have good jobs because I just turned 30. So I was like 24, 25 when I got into the business. And I said, there's no way my business is going to come from friends and families. So
Right.
it took a long time to get a deal done. I want to say be lucky if you pulled 30 grand in the first year, and definitely spent more than that.
And let's fast forward for a second so people understand perspective, because a lot of people have a tough time in their first year. You're doing great now. Why don't you give people like an idea of where you're at now, and then we'll go back to the beginning again.
So I guess what I would say is that it's what those coaches told me early on about you know, where your business would come from. No, I don't think any of us believe that when we start in the business, but what I can say is it is true. And if I would have listened and actually, you know, done what I was being told back then or what I was advised by other agents, probably would have been successful sooner. But yeah, I would say that's what it came down to. It's just consistency, and you can't give up if this is something that you want, or if this is, you know, the only job that you can see yourself being successful at. You have to just forget about comparing yourself to others. I remember even in the classes, I'm in the classes with dentists and some doctors and some mortgage brokers and all these people that I would consider highly professional. And you start thinking you're comparing yourself to them, and then you realize that you get better marks on the exams than they do. So you can't compare yourself, whether
Right.
somebody's been in the business for a short or a long period of time.
Right, absolutely. Now you mentioned that, when you got in there, you signed up for some coaching. Maybe you had some mentorship within the brokerage. Was it the same brokerage that you're at now?
No. So what I'll say is when I joined, I'll just fix this. When I joined, I joined like a boutique brokerage, and you know, I had felt you know, the owner of the brokerage at the time was very highly successful in law and real estate, etc. So I joined up there, and it was a boutique brokerage. And being somebody that's about 50 minutes north of the city, I found that you get what you pay for, and the fees were really low, and everything like that. But that's not why I joined. I joined because of the mentorship. But I found myself at that time, it just, I had no idea. I mean, you get licensed and I didn't even know what to do. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to put together a lease offer at 11 o'clock at night, and I've never done it before. So so then eventually I moved brokerages.
Okay. I mean, when you get in there, you don't know what you don't know. You have no idea, right? So you
Right.
really learn through experience and being hooked up with the right people. So you got in there, you said you were making calls, you were knocking on doors. Give us a little insight into what that looked like.
So we would, you know, we would, there's lists that you can get of for sale by owners, obviously, that are not on the do not call list. There's things like telelisting, where you can find areas that are who people who aren't on the do not call list, and you can call their landline. So basically we were looking on Kijiji, telelisting, like the phone book, um, you know, it's just driving by houses that were still for sale by owners, and newspapers. So we were calling basically everything we could like that. We would also call a lot of people that had their places privately being offered for lease, and see if they'd consider selling. And then from that, we moved on to calling around the area of a property that just sold, to say, hey, you know, property just sold in your area. We would call a lot of for sale by owners and try to get an appointment to come and meet with them. Basically anything that we could call. As far as door knocking, we would door knock areas where maybe there's a bit of a high turnover rate, or areas where properties were just listed or sold in the area. And that's kind
Right.
of how we started there, you know.
And what kind of results did you get from that activity? And were you consistent with that activity?
So we weren't, we were kind of consistent, but I'll tell you what I'm sure most new agents or agents hear from everybody: the follow up. You know, we would knock doors here, call here, but we wouldn't call them back again, most likely, and we wouldn't go and door knock again. We just bounce around to different areas and expect to get a deal in one of those areas. And then after, you know, a few months of doing that, and then the market shifted, we realized that a lot of those people now, you know, saw their neighbors' homes and their friends' homes selling for X, but now that the market took a hit, they were just too greedy, and you know, the market wouldn't produce those prices anymore.
Right, right. So people's expectations were kind of off kilter, as it happens when there's a shift. It takes a while for people to catch up, right?
Yeah.
So what then did start working for you? When did you find like something's clicking, things are working? When and what was it?
Okay, so after about 6 months or so, I went away on a vacation, and to backtrack a little bit, there was a guy same age as me, same kind of personality at that brokerage, and he looked like he was doing quite well. So me and him teamed up, and then that's when we were making our calls, and we got an office in the office and everything. Well, I went on a vacation, and then he had been to a Rob Vivian coaching event, a live event, and there was a broker owner there, and Rob Vivian talked him up about how he had become so successful and everything like that at such a young age. And Mike, my partner at the time, called me up and said, I think this brokerage would be a good move for us. They're looking for they're looking for quality over quantity, and
Right.
he wants to make us successful. So I joined that brokerage, and it was a Royal LePage. So I knew that at least having a brand, whether it was any brand that was known, I thought it might help out in my small town, because people were asking me where I work and they've never heard of it. So
Right.
joined up there, and it came down to, there was a lot of in-house training, a lot of support, and a lot of mentorship, and then a lot of people around us that were doing business. So that's kind of that's what kind of started getting, was confidence being built and being consistent and having support. So it doesn't matter where you are, if you have support and you have people that are around you that have been through it and that can help. And it also helped that the broker at the time had just finished doing sales, and got into the broker. So being able to talk to somebody that was in people's homes, meeting with them in those markets
Right.
helped.
Yeah, not someone that had been doing it 20, 30, 40 years earlier, but had hands-on experience recently and knew what was happening in the relevant current market, right?
Exactly.
Okay, great. And so, how did that translate into helping you build your business? What is it that you started doing? Were you doing anything consistently in terms of prospecting, or did you focus again? You mentioned on like the people that you know, like and trust. How did you go about, making sure
So
that you're developing that part of your business?
So what I did is I would still cold call, and stuff like that. We would still do a, yeah, you know what? Because our broker was very successful purely from cold calling and door knocking for a set amount of hours every day prior to opening the brokerage. Whether it didn't matter what was going on in his life. There was 2 or 4 hours a day nonstop prospecting. So we used to put our name tag on and go and door knock the area and stuff like that. And then what I would do, because I didn't have a lot of confidence, because I hadn't actually done many transactions, is I would always take an agent in my brokerage with me on a listing appointment who I know is very confident and successful. And that helped start to get listings signed and get deals going. And that built up my confidence to then, now what you're doing, what the paperwork is, how to put a listing up and advertise it. So that's kind of what started the initial couple of deals. As well as I would reach out to friends that I heard through the grapevine might be considering selling and stuff. And I would just say, look, we've got this tool called Collaborate, and I can put you on a list if you're looking to buy. And that was how I got my first buyer deal was, I told them it doesn't cost you anything. I'll do the research and find you houses. But my first deal ever actually was a mere listing. There was a Kijiji post, and I called them up. I said, look, you're trying to sell your home by yourself. And, it wasn't a big deal, but they ended up paying me to, put their property on MLS and advertise it. Not, what we would normally charge,
Right.
but it gave me the confidence to go and meet people in person and present to them, and then, lay the foundation.
Right. Excellent. And so when did business stop becoming such a roller coaster ride? Because we've all experienced that, and become a little bit more consistent. And what do you think, which activities really led to that?
So after my first year, that wasn't very successful. I mean, I wasn't fully dedicated at that point yet, right? I
Right.
was still, I had to make money, so I was still doing other work. But I joined Tom Ferry coaching in the second year, And, I went to one of the events in Toronto, joined the coaching, and it was very expensive, almost $1,500 a month.
Yeah.
And, I'm not making much money. And, among other things, that coaching, I mean, I threw money at everything that could ever be offered to new agents. But point being, joined that coaching and, you know, had a coach, and that really kind of helped. My coach would make us, you got to make 20 contacts a day or follow up with 3 people, or else you've got to send a gift card to, somebody that you really don't like, for example, stuff like that.
Right.
And being active on social media, um, like I normally would. I've always been on social media, posting up lots of different things, not being open, not being shy. And that gives people a sense that they can trust you. But that's what projected. And then once I started to get some business going, then things got a little better. And the second year I did well, I guess, in terms of like, what people consider to be pretty good in our industry. But that year was still a lot of up and down, questioning brokerage switches, and, then breaking up the partnership that we had and going on my own, and, trying to do prospecting in the city when I lived farther north. So it was kind of just trying to find my way.
And how did you finally land on where you were going to focus doing business, and what led to you splitting up the partnership?
So the partnership thing, I realized we were both amazing, but I guess my goals and aspirations and what I want is a lot. Like there's people out there that they're happy with X amount of money a year, or happy with
Sure.
X amount of time with their family. And they're happy, but there's people like me who always have to have, always have to be doing something that stresses you out and tries to move you to the next level. So I just realized that the area that I worked in was further away from the city, about an hour away.
Yeah.
And he had his area, which was down there. So it just, one of us, I'll tell you exactly what it is. With a partnership, you need to talk about upfront what each person's, kind of job or responsibility is. And we didn't do that.
Yeah.
So I felt at the time that it might, I might've been doing a little bit too much, and that I should go off on my own.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And like you said, you have to be very clear up front about everyone's roles, responsibilities, and expectations, as well as their goals, and everything has to be in alignment. Otherwise, it just won't work out. But it's all a learning process, right?
That's right. So
Absolutely.
the first 2 years, it was from one brokerage as a solo agent to a partnership at that brokerage, then to a new brokerage as a partnership, then at that same brokerage to solo. So the amount of money, the thousands and thousands spent on the new business cards and the open house signs and the for sale signs each time, like, set me back a lot before I even, got deals on the table.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and it can be a little bit discouraging when you try and then you have to adjust and adjust and adjust. But finally, you've kind of found your way, right? And so,
Yep.
how is it that you found the area that you decided to focus on? I know you grew up in that particular area, right? But you
Yeah.
said you were originally thinking you'd work in the city. So, what happened there?
So office was in Scarborough, but I moved from the area that I'm in now, which is like Georgina, in 2013. I just, decided one night, me and a bunch of buddies were snowmobiling and had a couple drinks, and I just, something clicked in my head that said, Steve, you got to move out of here. You don't want to be hanging out at Tim Hortons all night, every night, and, like, not being successful. So I moved to Richmond Hill in 2013, and I got into the real estate group, Real Estate Hacks. And when referrals would be asked for, I would message agents and say, look, I'm a new agent. I'm hungry. I've done all this training and everything like that. And I'd love to handle your clients in this area. And a good friend of mine now, who's also an agent in London, she trusted me with her immediate family. And I did about, a few good deals in Richmond Hill based on that. So I started to do agent referrals only in Richmond Hill, and focus up on the area where I'm born and raised, Georgina, because I knew the area well. And it did seem like some of my friends and stuff were getting to an age where they were ready to start, buying real estate and stuff. So I really started to focus on that area. And
Were you doing any kind of database marketing, newsletters, emails, anything like that to sort of let everyone know I'm in the business, I'm there for you, or was it all just sort of word of mouth, social media stuff?
So in the beginning, I messaged every Facebook friend I had and asked them if they could, give me their most up-to-date info and that I wouldn't be spamming them. And I did build many databases, but I never went back to them after I built them. So I'd also hired a ton of different companies that would do newsletters. I was doing bomb videos, but the problem again was I was never consistent in
Yeah.
anything that I did. So what ended up happening is just word of mouth. It was word of mouth. It was people seeing me on social media, people messaging me, asking me for home evaluations and stuff. And then obviously when I started to get listings and stuff, then, maximize the marketing on that. So I would say the third year in, which would have been, well, we're 2022, probably 2019, was when things really started to kick off. And I really started to realize that what everyone was telling me in the beginning and the coaches and stuff were right. Your business is going to come from relationships. So I forgot to mention the first couple of years in the business, I went to every single networking event, conference I could go to. I went to California for Tom Ferry events. I went to Blue Mountain. I went to Niagara Falls. I went to dinners, everything. And that started to pay off specifically with agents referring me their clients in my areas.
Yeah, that's something that people overlook often is that relationships with other agents inside and especially outside of your immediate area will definitely pay off in the long run, right? Because you can learn, you can bounce ideas off of each other because there's no threat there. No one's threatening on taking anyone's business, so they're more open and willing to share. But again, when they have clients moving to your area, who do they know?
Exactly.
So, how would you say your business is broken up in terms of sources? What percentage is coming from referrals from realtors? What percentage is coming from database? What percentage is coming from prospecting? How does it sort of lay out now?
So I will say that, like probably many of us, before the pandemic hit, I would say my business was probably like good 30-40% agent referrals. And the rest would have been, just from being kind of known in the area, right? And I still wasn't living here. I didn't move back to this area until exactly 10 months ago. So right before the pandemic hit, my business was coming from mostly agent referrals, a lot of buyers, and, quite a few sellers just from word of mouth or, people seeing my social media. But business really changed when the lockdown started. When the first lockdown started, I remember going, hey, I've got a few closings coming up, but I don't know like where my money's going to come from next. A lot of bills and responsibilities, don't know where it's going to come from. Spent almost probably it was like 2 months on the couch, binge watching Netflix shows. And then all of a sudden it went from no calls, no business to an agent referred me a buyer lead for a listing that he took in my area because he was close to those people.
Right.
And that went from those people bought that property through me. Then I listed their house, double-ended their house, and then that built up the momentum, and it never stopped since then. So I would say in the 2021 and so far into 2022, business has shifted a lot. I've been 90% listings. I rarely get any calls from buyers, and I think that's because the market in everywhere, but in our areas, increased so much that nobody is even close to being able to afford something in this area. So it's all buyers coming from different markets.
Right.
And all of my sellers in this area they're gone. Nobody's buying here. They're going North Bay, Elliott Lake, Timmins, Sudbury, Newfoundland. So it's totally shifted, and it's still quite a few agent referrals, but to be honest, the last 4 or 5 months, it's been a mix of advertising listings on social media and direct mail postcards. When the pandemic started, I started sending about every single listing or sold I had. I would send 5,000 postcards to the exact same area, the same postcard. And after about 6 months of doing that, people just started calling, asking me information or having me over to meet with them. And I'd see a stack of them there or all over their fridge. And that's been actually where probably 40% of my business has been coming from the last year.
Okay, great. So a lot of people, they hear about geographic farming, they hear about just sold, just listed postcards. They don't, you can dump a whole lot of money into it and get nothing back. So you can, on the other end of it is it can pay off very large. It's a matter of consistency. It's a matter of the message that you're putting out. Do you happen to have an example of that you can show of what your postcard would typically look like? What kind of content would be on it?
Yeah, I'll grab one.
Yeah,
And
you can send it to me if you don't have one physically, and
there's one here. So my assistant's looking for it. If not, I've got right here. I can post it up on the screen and you'll see. And it's never changed. It's been exactly the same as it is right now. And let's see if you can see that. Put it up in the camera there. But
a little lower. There we go. Okay, so sold with the house and your name and picture.
yeah, and then on the back of it, it just says some of the services that I offer. And it's exactly that. And it just so happened that I was getting enough listings that I was able to send these out once or twice a week. And I didn't bother with the sold over asking or sold in this many days, because
Right.
I find that it's just, it's, everything's selling over asking right now, right?
Right, exactly.
So I just put sold on it. It's my face and everything. I send it. And I will tell you, I would say about 80% of the people, although we, masks and stuff, I go to their house to meet with them. They say that it was a smile on the postcard that made them trust me. So,
You're such a friendly guy. There you go. All right, perfect.
You're right. Consistency. When I started in the business, I'd send 5,000 here, 5,000 there. And hey, we just spent a couple of grand. Where's the business? But I had these, everyone knows direct mail is expensive. For about 5,000 houses, you're looking at around $1,000, $1,100. But I had to send them out and pretty well go broke, getting them out. And then the business finally started to come. So it's not something that you can just send out for a few months and expect to get rich.
Right, exactly. And when you said you send them out to 5,000 houses at a time, was that like 5,000 dropped at once, or was that 2,000 dropped twice? Would you send the same card multiple times, or is it just once per?
So because the area I'm in, there's a few small towns. So there's like 3 or 4 different post offices to hit the same areas. And it works out to just under 5,000. So I would hit that same area only once with only per listing.
Right.
Yeah. And most of the time it would be just sold. Some houses I do just listed, but it would mostly be just sold.
Right. And so people are seeing that there's activity, there's results. You've got that friendly face, friendly smile. So people often wonder, do I put my picture on the advertisement? Do I not? For you, obviously it worked.
Well, I've heard that discussion a lot of times, but to be honest, if you think back to somebody you met the other day or anything, I can't remember any names anymore. I mean, I can tell you, I remember me and my partner back in the day, we were door knocking in Whitby or Oshawa or something like that. And he's like, look at that guy there. He does a ton of business in Durham region. And, he's got some girls on his team and he's built up a nice team in general, but he's got this awesome jawline. And I think it might be McDougal or something like that.
All right.
But I never remembered his name ever, but I remember what the house looked like. I remember the sign. I remember his face on the sign, and I'll never forget it. So people remember faces because they'll see me on the postcard, and then maybe they see me on social media, and then maybe they see a for sale sign and they call. I could guarantee if my picture wasn't on my stuff, no matter how I looked, it would not generate even half the business that it does right now.
Right, absolutely. And you'll send me a digital copy so that I can put it up on the screen so people can see what it actually looks like, because that was a little bit tough to see. But that's great. So you're consistently putting out content to people that touches them. A house in my area sold. This is the guy. I'm going to call him to find out what my home is worth if I'm thinking of doing something.
Yeah, and a lot of times it would be they wouldn't even really call to ask what it sold for. I mean, they know that houses are selling fast, but it's just with so many hitting their mailbox, when they think of selling, they think this guy is the last guy that I can remember seeing, and he sells a lot. Even if they just toss it into in the recycling bin, they've seen your face.
Right.
And they would call and they would say, look, I'm just calling. I got this house here. We have absolutely no thoughts of selling. We don't want to sell. We want to make that very clear. We purely just want to know kind of what our house is worth. And then I would go over there and meet with them and give them an idea based in this market. And then they'd call me back a couple days later and say, yeah, we want to list, so.
That's great. So when you're showing up there, here's the thing that people get mixed messages on, especially through different coaching, right? Different styles.
Yeah,
They'll say pre-qualify. So don't waste your time. Only go there if they're planning on doing something in the next 30, 60, 90 days, right? Whereas these people said up front, they're not planning on doing anything, right? If you would have
that's right.
pre-qualified to the point of, I don't want to waste my time, you never would have got the listing.
That you make such a good point, because in the beginning, when I first started, somebody could call me and say, hey, I want to look at this house. I don't even care. I would just be there in 10 minutes, show you the house. Okay.
Right.
Obviously now I realize, especially with having a daughter and stuff, there's a lot of time wasters, but I would say that at least 50% or more of the people that call me and they tell me they're not planning to sell, they just want some information. The ones that tell you that they don't want to sell or that they're not in a rush to buy or sell are always almost the first ones to do it. And the people that tell you they're really serious are usually the ones that waste the most time.
They kick the tires, and 6 months later, you're like, hey, what's going on? We don't know.
And I know different people have different personalities, but if I'm looking to buy a car or I'm looking to buy something, it's always the person that is friendly and that doesn't even push me that I'm going to call up right away.
Right, absolutely. And that's another thing. You're building relationships. You're building new relationships. So when the coaches in the beginning said it's the people that know you, like you, trust you, yes, but it's also the people that you get to know and that get to like and trust you from those new relationships that will move forward with you, right?
Exactly. And I mean, everyone has a different style. I know some agents that are, whether it's their social media presence or in person, they're strictly professional or strictly only about business. They don't tell you nothing about their personal life, nothing like that. I'm sure they do well with people like that. But
Right.
me, I'm totally different. Like it's a totally different story. And if I'm sure you're going to ask me eventually about how I do a listing kind of presentation and stuff, and we'll get into that at that time. And sure, it'll be different for most than it is for me.
Yeah, well, there we go. So there's your leeway. What is it that you're doing? Because you're not really going to it as a presentation most of the time. It sounds like it's just like, what's my home worth? You go, you meet them, you develop rapport, and then that's it. I mean, why don't you tell us, what does it look like?
So what I do, okay, up until the last year, maybe year and a half, I did a lot of business, but I didn't really do any listing appointments. It was never a listing appointment. So, but anyway, we get to what I do. So I normally will, print out comparables. I've got this beautiful listing presentation I paid thousands of dollars 4 years ago, laminated and everything. I mean, I print off all the reports in relation to the property and everything. And
Right.
and then I get to the house and I leave my laptop bag in and I walk in either with nothing or with a pen and a couple comparables folded in my pocket. And I talk to them. They show me the house. I kind of find out, why are you selling? Where are you going? And I tell them, look, this is what I figure your house is worth. And if you want to sell, just give me a call anytime and we can go forward. And then a lot of times before this crazy market and when they're up in my area, I mean, you've got a ton of different lot sizes and different conditions and style of houses. There's not, I don't do a lot of, I do mostly bungalows and raised bungalows. Very rarely do we get 2 stories. So you've got to go there and see the house and then go and do your research and then give them a price, because until you see it, if it hasn't been on the market in a long time, you don't even know what you're getting into, right? But I've never in my life walked into a listing and even had paperwork with me or had it filled out ever. And I've never tried to get them to sign on the spot. I always tell them, if you want to work with me, this is what I can do for you. Just give me a call or a message, and then we can go forward with the paperwork.
Okay, so you mentioned that sometimes you have to see the property and then come back to them with a price. So how does that look like?
So I would tell them on the phone, they would call me and ask, hey, we want to know what our house is worth. And I'd say, okay, I noticed, you've been there a long time. It hasn't been on the market for a while. I need to come out and take a look at it. And okay, in this market right now, you don't really need to. You just have to pick the range that you want to list at. And, but when we had to do more research,
Right.
I would go there, take a look at it, take some notes, and then I'd be able to easily compare it. And I would actually go sometimes and physically drive by and view other similar properties so that I could, back up my price to them. But I would normally just give them a call and tell them, look, you'd probably get about this. And it depends on timing. If you're ready to list in a few weeks, but if it's a month down the road, the market can change by then. So
Right.
very rarely did I actually go back for the second appointment. And, you know, anytime that clients did call me over to list, and I did bring paperwork because I knew they wanted to list, I would ask them if they're familiar with email, and I would leave and then DocuSign email them the paperwork later. We still wouldn't sign it on the spot.
Okay. So that's your style. It's pretty casual, which is great and makes people feel comfortable. Now, have you been in situations where they're interviewing several agents? And if so, how does that play out?
So there has been some times that they've been interviewing other agents, and they've either told me before or told me after that they decided to go with someone else. But I don't know if I've just been lucky or not, but I can only remember maybe 3 or 4 times that I've ever been told that they're interviewing other agents. Back when I was new in the business, if they told me that, I would bring in a highly successful agent who's been in the business a
Right.
while. I would call a colleague in the area and say, look, I got a listing appointment. It's it's a little daunting. I'll give you 50% and we'll co-list it if you come with me on the appointment. So it's easy for them. They come, they do the talking, because I find myself to just talk and build a relationship and not really get into the schematics of paperwork and everything like that. So
Right.
that's what I would do. But now in the last maybe 6 months, it's a little more often where you hear the odd person say they want to interview someone else. But um, to be honest, the only times that I've got feedback from clients about interviewing or going with somebody else, it's been in relation to commission.
Right. So let's talk about that real quick. As everybody knows, commission's negotiable, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. We'll get that out. But how do you handle that? Because there's always pressure on commissions, especially, in and around where we are or anywhere near the Toronto or greater Toronto expanded area. Because there's just so many agents out there. Uh, how does that come up? When does that come up, if at all, in your casual conversation?
So I mean, it's interesting. So there's a couple of approaches I take. Normally, if I've established that a client wants to list, I don't even tell them. I fill out the paperwork, I send it to them. I list in, obviously, some people just sign away without looking. So I list a couple of points. Commission is this, and that. Never hear another word. It's only been the last 6 to 12 months that people have actually asked for a reduction. And I tell them all the same thing, what I charge. And I just tell them, look, it's a small town we live in. I sell houses for family, houses for friends, and I charge them what I consider to be the full rate of commission. And if I were to give you a discount and they were to find out, then I'd have a lot of unhappy people that I've dealt with in the past. And I always tell them the options there. If there's people in the area that I could refer you that are willing to do it for less, that's their business model. But with me, if I've got vacations coming up, if I've got events I got to attend, I'm always available and I'm your top priority. And that's why I charge what I charge. And 9.9 times out of 10, they say, wow, Steve, thanks for explaining everything you do to justify it. But we were just curious. That's all. We've heard this and that. But there's been more pushback in the last 6 months, but still 9 times out of 10, there's once you explain it to them, it's everything's good to go, gravy.
Excellent. All right. So I think we've covered a lot of ground. I always like to ask agents this question. If you had to, let's say you had a niece or a nephew or a little younger sibling that was somewhere else in the country, in the States, somewhere, and they're like, okay, I think I can do this real estate thing. Tell me what to do from the ground up. How would you advise that person to build a successful business?
So normally until I saw a quote yesterday or the day before that kind of changed my mind a little bit on that. But normally, if somebody came to me like that and they asked me about the business, I would be honest with them and tell them, look, of course, it's not for everyone. It's hard, but I would tell them exactly what a local agent who's been in the business for 30, 40 years told me when I bought my first couple properties through him before I was licensed. And he said, you can make as much money as the garbage man, your garbage man, or your lawyer. And it all depends on you. So if it's not something that you can do half-ass, this is something that is stressful. I mean, it stresses your friends, it stresses your family. You can't, you can't do the things that you want to do. So I would tell them what the coaches told me. Your business is going to come from people that you already know and people that know of you, and then people that are going to know of you. So you have to build relationships and make a list of all of those people and strengthen those relationships. And you can't, I see a lot of agents in the business posting about friends and family using other agents and stuff. We need to realize we're not entitled to anybody's business.
Right.
I have had, immediate family call me in an area that I've lived in and ask me to sell their house. And I said, look, I would love to do it, but I think you'd be best suited with this agent based on yourself, right? So you can't expect nothing from no one just because you hold a real estate license. And if you take that, if you understand that in the beginning and you understand not to let things get personal, then you will do really well. But if you're taking things if you're the type that takes everything personal, if somebody doesn't use you or stuff like that, then you have to give before you receive. So give value to friends and family and people. You can't just call them up after 5 years and say, hey, I know we used to be friends, but are you looking to buy or sell?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad you brought that up because that was the magical word I was looking for. Sorry, I got something in my eyes driving me crazy. It was basically value. How are you giving the value? So again, in that situation, you've got your nephew who's out in, I don't know, Timbuktu, New York, and
Yeah.
he wants to build a business. And how do I give value to those people? What is value? How do I build that up so that there is a point where they'll say, you know what, this is the guy that I can trust to call and take care of me?
So if I was recommending to that niece or nephew or whatever of how they can provide value to the people that they know, I would, want to know what their personality is like. If their personality is like mine, social, they like to go out, have drinks, they like food, then I would say that's where you start. Do what you love to do, and you'll be surrounded by those people. Like what I used to do, go out to every networking event, every dinner. I know me and you went to a ton of,
Yeah.
we all like steak. Put yourself out there doing the things that you want to do, and the
Right.
people that are like you and that have the same personality are going to be around. And then once they know what you're doing, that you're getting into real estate, then you're right there. They have access to you. And, they have to, give people kind of, evaluations on their home and help out in the community and stuff like that. It's just build those relationships so that those people know that you genuinely are not looking for anything in return. And by asking what you can do for them and by doing things for them, they're going to, the law of reciprocity or whatever it is,
Yeah.
they're going to want to reciprocate and they're going to feel like they owe you something. So maybe you can build up your list of service providers, of painters and construction and garbage pickup and all that, and you can recommend them to them, and then they're going to feel like they owe you something in return.
Absolutely. That's a great tip, especially if you're going into a town, whether you've been there for a while or you're new. Reach out to those people, develop relationships with tradespeople in the area, and then you may get business from them or not, but at least that's now a resource that you can apply and supply to people that you meet and to create those relationships and create
Well,
that kind of value.
I remember when I was taking my courses, I had Serena Hart as an instructor. I mean, she's been in real estate a long time, very knowledgeable and professional. And she told us when we were, almost ready to get licensed, that go out and meet with contractors and, painters and all that, and tell them, look, I've got to refer 3 names to all of my clients and stuff, to be fair. And, have lunch with them so that you can understand how they operate and make sure that they're good. And just tell them, look, do you think if I toss your name on my marketing or I start putting your name out there, that maybe you could probably refer me one deal a year, and they go, wow, you know what's one deal a year? There's always somebody looking to buy or sell. And then, and that's really important to do stuff like that.
Absolutely. Reaching out to lawyers, reaching out to everybody in the community, developing those relationships with business people, helping them build their business. What I did when I started was I got involved with the local chamber of commerce, right? And started asking people, how can I help you build your business, and what can I do for you? And that started to develop those relationships. So that's another way of going about it. Excellent. Is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered that would really help either a new agent or an agent that's struggling?
So I guess if there's one thing on the top of my mind, it's every agent or new agent or struggling agent wants to know what the key is. Is it door knocking? Is it cold calling? Is it
Right.
direct mail? I will tell you what it is. People, what I mentioned to you a few minutes ago about the quote I saw recently is the quote that I saw, and I think I shared it on my social media, was something in regards of, you know, people like, I don't remember it, but it's kind of like you start a business and people there and there. And then, after years and years, like me, 5 years now, I've got a really successful business, but people will ask me what it is that got me here. It's 5 years of trial and error, of getting upset, getting angry, getting stressed, happy, emotional. So if you're the type of person that, you had a job before, you love being on the phone calling people, that's what you double down on. Me, I just like posting everything online, whether it's singing and just random stuff. And
Wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. I've never seen you singing ever. So what are you talking about?
well, I'm talking like, just you're parked, you're sitting in the car and you start singing. But that's the thing. There's different social media platforms. So Snapchat is one where I have mostly friends who, you go out and kind of let loose with, and they're not going to judge you with what you post. And then maybe
Gotcha.
Facebook. So what I always tell people is social media might be my biggest lead provider, but if you don't enjoy being on social media every day, posting and letting everybody know everything about you, where you live, what you own, this and that, then it's not going to work for you.
Right.
Like I will say, I've spent tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars on every ISA, every online lead generation program there is. And I would get thousands of leads. But for me, I don't call them. I don't follow up with them. I'm not passionate about it. So then weeks later, I get a message from them. Hey, thanks, Steve, for sending me listings for the past 2 years. I bought already. I bought and sold since then. So
Right.
I double down on what works for me. And that's local, that's social media, and that's just like being everywhere all the time, and being trusting and not forcing any paperwork or anything on anybody.
Yeah, and I'd like to end on this note, because you and I have been around the block a little while. We've met tons of other realtors. You and I are with the same mentality, networking constantly, right? So you learn what works for other people. And the amazing thing and difficult thing about this business is that everything works.
Yeah,
Everything works.
everything works.
But it only works if it's aligned with who you are. Because, like you said, you're not going to call these online leads back. So why waste your time and money on it? Focus on what works for you. It'll work for somebody else that is willing to do it. So find what works for you, whatever it is that you're doing. If it's not working, try something different. But there is a method of building business that will work for you and your personality that you can be consistent with, because consistency is key, right?
And the one thing to add to that is, had I have not gone to almost every dinner, every conference, every realtor get together, every coaching training seminar in person, it wouldn't have carried me through the pandemic when the first lockdown started. I realized that during that lockdown, that's when those agents who I spent years and years and years building relationships with started to pay off.
There it
So
is. It takes time, right? People see there's that meme of the iceberg, right? And you see the big iceberg peeking out of the water, but then you don't see all of that work, that huge growth underneath the water, right? And that's what it is. That's the 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is for the person out there listening to build up into it. I would also say, in terms of if you're just getting in the business, teams, look for a team in the area that can teach and mentor you if you don't know anybody or anything. I think that's a great solution. It may not be your solution forever, or it may be, but it's a great opportunity to learn from someone that's doing it in a system that works.
You know what? So I will say without a doubt, if you're a new agent, that a team is you shouldn't do anything else. Obviously, if I would have joined the team in the beginning, I would have learned a lot more. But the
Yeah.
type of person I am, I don't care if I have to work 10 times harder. I want the recognition myself.
Right.
So, it's kind of an pride and ego thing. But for a
Sure.
new agent, if you don't join a team, then you might not make it in the business. You might get so stressed and overwhelmed that, join a team for a year or two. Let the team manager or team leader know in the beginning that you're not going to be there. You're just learn everything you can learn, and then maybe continue that way or go off on your own. But starting on your own, especially in a market we're in right now that is likely going to have some sort of change in the future, it's not a good idea to start solo.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be challenging for sure, depending on your personality type. All right, Mr. Steven Sarasin, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you joining us today and sharing your story with everybody.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. It was good to touch base and to give whatever value I can give to everybody else out there.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to meeting you at another steak meetup event when we can do that, and
Yeah, me too.
we'll share some meat. All
Sounds good, Lauren. I really
right.
appreciate you being on. Thanks.
Thank you. Take it easy.